Record now. Yo, record now.
Okay, sweet. It's recording. All right. Should we just get started? I don't really have any topics off the top of my head, but I guess welcome to the second week of the podcast.
That's right. Number two.
Yeah, two special, man, because two's more than one.
Yeah. Two is special because you've doubled. It's literally a 100% increase since your last rep, right?
I think it's the formation of a habit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You do something once and it's kind of like maybe we did it, but the second time it feels a little bit different. It's like, all right, maybe we're going to keep doing this. All right, so two special. There's a sequel now. What did we talk about last time and what do we want to talk about this time?
Well, let's see. So we talked about, I think identity came up. I remember you had shared it out a little bit in some, shout out to Karen, right? It's like, digital identity is maybe a thing that is worth expanding on. Formation, which is actually interesting because as a meta point, throughout the week, just knowing that we had this podcast, like I'm naturally like queuing things. I didn't write it down because I want it to be organic, and if it floats away, it floats away. But there's like a background of like, oh my god, I want to talk to Hack. Like this could be a thing that's like constantly going. So even now, I'm remembering some of those moments. We were talking about kids a lot yesterday. I was talking to a lot of friends about kids, which, when you talk about kids, we talked about this before. It's all about identity. It's all about identity formation and what have you. So that was fun. I don't know.
Yeah, kids is an interesting topic for sure. I think if you've never been around kids before and actually see them go from not being able to talk to like being able to associate a sound with an object or a sound with a person, essentially like learning the concept of language for the first time and seeing that whole thing happen from the age of probably around, I don't know, 6 to 12 months is when they start, saying like random stuff like mama or like milk or daddy or whatever. And then like, I have a 3-year-old nephew now, and this dude just full on talks in semi-complete sentences, and it's kind of weird, watching him go from this little dude that can like barely make any noises to now he's like, hey, Uncle Hack, you want to go downstairs and play? And I'm like, what did you say, dude? But yeah, and then also once they start developing the idea of the sound of their name, so that's like identity. It's like so my nephew's name is Leo. So first he labels objects like mama or milk or baby. That's his sister. But now when I say hey Leo, like the sound Leo to him means, oh wait, that's me. And then the idea is that he starts building around the name Leo and what that means to him going forward. Hopefully we raise him in an environment where all those ideas are good and all those things are empowering for him. But, of course, that isn't always the case growing up.
Yeah, goodness, like I think my mind just started jamming up because like it's such a impenetrable like topic, like the concept of identity is one that keeps flipping because it's like, is it something from within? Like, are you what like defines your identity? And then you're like, wait, no, it's really like relative. Of course it's relative, right? And then like relative to what other people think. And then it's like, but then that it shifts back almost to like the internal. And it's like almost like, in this like super position, like observer, observee, and I don't know, it's just, your mind really just starts spinning. And it's funny because for me, my inquiries into like that identity stuff is like, we've talked a lot about, I think before, about topics that are just so sometimes difficult to grasp that you have to hit them so many times, and like repetition is a requirement. and sometimes you feel like you've hit the clarity and then you lose it. You know, that's how I feel about a lot of what you just said, and maybe it can be a long running topic for us, because it's you know, it's worth pulling that thread, I think, a little bit over time. So yeah, man, that's crazy. I'll close with this: is that I think I was speaking to a couple who has chosen to be child free, and it's interesting because you know, a decade ago I was like in those very shoes, um, and have softened since. Have decided like, yeah, you know, it would be really cool to actually have kids. But something that they said, kind of just like, nothing that they really especially profound. I was taking on a listening role just because, like, you know, this decision for children is so personal, and like, and if you're just meeting somebody, you want to be really, I think, respectful. So I'm just listening, and one of the things that the guy said was just like, oh yeah, you know, people always say that kids teach you so much, right? Like, they teach you so much about yourself. They teach you so much. It's like, that's bullshit, you know? But it's funny because I'm like, what exactly are kids teaching you? Like, every single person extracts or is looking for a different lesson from their kids. Certainly you and I think, look at it from a little bit of a curious lens, like kids, but man, kids impart all sorts of lessons, and what are those lessons for people, right? Not everyone is like talking about consciousness and identity in words, like what they think about what their kids teach them, right? Kids teach them other things, like, I think, how to maybe look at life with you know, a certain eye, you know, a certain lightness that I think touches on maybe like how maybe one should live, you know, but I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely like a purity there in terms of like I guess like you know, like kind of like kids exploring the world for the first time, trying things like, you know, uh I guess like sometimes doing well, sometimes failing. Like, I mean, do kids teach you? I personally think, I mean, I definitely want to have kids, and I definitely think that, you know, like building a little world around like these little humans is like, it's like a worthwhile endeavor. But you know, obviously, I don't think, I feel like it might be one of those, like nowadays, like I know you're probably getting to the age where some of your friends are starting to have kids, and you know, and you know, a bunch of my friends are starting having kids. And you know, some people, they're like, yo, this is great, you know, it's everything I wanted. And some people was like, yo, like, I haven't slept in like years. And then so I think right now I want it, but it's hard to say, like, you know, once you're like, you know, averaging 5 hours of sleep and having to take care of like two little human pets, whether or not that's something that you'll find, you know, worthwhile. But I don't know, just the idea around like creating life and nurturing it and watching it over time, to me seems worthwhile. And I'm guessing, and these are lessons, you know, stuff that I think that we're gonna learn when we have kids. Well, I mean, literally, like, I have no idea. I mean, I literally have no idea. You know, it's not something that you can easily figure out by guessing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, you know, I think my stance on kids, as someone who is a self-acknowledged overthinker, over optimizer, is that I just don't even think about it or dissect it anymore. You know, I like somewhat jokingly just like say that it would be fun. Obviously it's not all fun, and but like, there's just no one right. It's just such a multi-dimensional thing to have kids, and there's literally nothing you could, I think, in your one lifetime, like very few things that you can actually elect to do that are on that scale. And you know, up until more recently in human history, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't such a, like, you know, calculation. Um, like 100%, not every, like, people have not wanted kids. There have been people who like, you know, resisted the forces of society to say like, look, I don't want to have kids, which is like, I mean, let's be real. That's going against the evolutionary grain in a very big way. But now that society has kind of gotten to a point where there's so much, everything is so indexed on you, the individual, your story, your choices, your trials and tribulations, and now like your decision to have a kid or not have a kid. But I don't know. Yeah, that's real. But kids are still, we're still humans. Like there's still an evolutionary drive, and yeah, I don't know. I guess to me in some way I'm kind of like surrendering to that in my own life, just saying like it's going to be an emotional decision. It's like a little bit selfless, right? But also very egoic to like have a kid. But, like there's no way I can talk about it in a way that's not like involves me, right? You can't say like, oh, I'm gonna like, you know, give myself fully to this new human being and they're going to grow up to be this great citizen. Like, okay, that's like a bit of a narcissistic bend. And they also could grow up to be like a shit person, like by all accounts, or, you know, have real challenges in their life, right? That I might be subjecting another soul to unwillingly. So yeah, it's one of the craziest concepts for sure.
What about, okay, this might be a little bit, one thing that I notice a lot of times when people have kids is they become a lot more empathetic to their parents and like their parents' struggle. It's kind of like, you know, like growing up, you know, you watch your mom and dad, I'm sure like do whatever they can to make ends meet. I don't know what it was like in your household. In my household, I had only my dad worked and my mom looked after 5 of us, right? And then, you know, my mom's always been like a little bit kind of like, a little bit crazy. I mean, I guess like the crazy Asian mom, I guess like stereotype fits her pretty well. And my siblings and I, we always joke about it. But you know, now seeing I guess my brother O have 2 kids and seeing how much work it is just to take care of 2 kids, and then wondering how my mom did it for all 5 of us. And you know, she is a crazy Asian mom, but she has some semblance of sanity, like how she kept that little bit of sanity. I'm sure I guess my brother with 2 kids empathizes a lot more with my mom than I do, just because I'm like the uncle that gets to play with them anytime I want to. But my brother actually loses sleep over looking after his kids, and so I don't know, like, you know, there is like a certain level of empathy, I think, that perhaps would not get developed there for my parents had my brother not had kids, and not through any fault of his own, but it's almost like one of those things where you can't know until you do. Like, I mean, I can sit here and watch and be like, yeah, that was probably really hard for my mom and dad to raise all 5 of us. Yeah, that was pretty difficult. I can only imagine. You know, but until my ass is like losing sleep, and until my ass is like, you know, changing diapers, and until, you know, I have to do all that and, you know, work 40-50 hours a week to feed like these little human pets or whatever you want to call them for 18 years, and then pay for their college to make sure that they become somewhat respected in society and contribute and stuff like that. I don't know, maybe perhaps there's some value there. Just being able to get to that level of empathy for the parents. And I guess my parents I have a good relationship with, but maybe that's not the case for everybody.
Yeah, no, I mean, 100%, right? And that extends not only to, I mean, it's a big moment once you kind of realize what your parents did, right? Like that's a watershed moment in your own life. For people who haven't gone through that, like, you know,
realizing, as in like when you say realize, you mean like,
yeah,
not just like, yo, yeah, I know my dad did this or my mom did this. Like actually like, oh shit, like, you know, I'm 30 and I look back and I'm like, oh my God, my parents were just humans. Like, I don't know if that makes any sense. It's like literally like the first time I thought of my mom and dad as a human being. I know that sounds terrible, but
No, no, it's
um,
so true. Because there's actually so much depth to fully empathizing with another person. Um, you know, and I think that if you can fully empathize with another person, like fully, deeply, and you hold yourself to that, I I really do challenge that thought. Like I really do ask yourself, like, is there any space for like hate at the end of that, right? Like or judgment, right? If you really understood what another person was going through or who they are and just what it all is. Yeah, and I think that extends out so much further too. I think in your life, in a sense, your parents represent the an oppressive force, right? Not fully. Like I mean, they pressed against you so that you could press outward, right? Back to that identity formation. Like that's a necessary part of development and growth. Like you need pressure. And they represented so much more than just parenthood. They represented the whole of everything, trying to like make you into something that you didn't understand, you didn't maybe you didn't want, but um and then I think once you realize that like they themselves are pressed up against all these forces and are just like you, as you said, it is quite a moment, and then you start to realize that like that's true for everyone, like your boss and your coworkers, and like they're raising kids, and it's just like I think that inquiry, if people can like keep going with it, is a powerful one. And I don't know. I think I think what's maybe forming or emerging here out of the conversation is like there are certain triggers or thing situations that help. I think people arrive towards that same kind of space. Right, having kids is certainly one of them. I think uh, grappling with like chronic illness or terminal illness is another one, right? Um, and I this is where I always come in and I caveat to say that like I try to talk about these things whenever I get into this topic and not um, over romanticize suffering, because once you start talking about these things, there's a common theme is that they're all hard as fuck and they're like all really hard. Um, so anyway, I'm gonna hand it over to you while I adjust because the sun's coming in.
yeah, man, no worries. Yeah, you know what? One thing I was thinking about, and I was talking. It's interesting to me, like when you think about the lessons that you've learned through hardship, um, and like some lessons you can only learn through hardship. Uh, like I'm not sure how to explain that, but like okay, so I was talking to Lisa, and Lisa is my brother's wife, and they have two kids, and we're talking about how different their children's lives are compared to like our lives growing up. You know, just because like like when I was born, my parents had been in this country for like maybe 6 or 7 years, and they started literally with zero. So you can imagine me growing up, like we didn't have much. Um, I never felt that way, of course, but like we literally didn't have much. But Leo, for instance, for his birthday, because we're more settled as a family in the U.S. now, and there's so many, like he has so many aunts and uncles, and we like to like kind of like spoil him a little bit. His life is gonna hit a little different. It starts a little differently, and of course, you want to give him everything that you can give him. But a lot of the things I was given, through my parents, and maybe you can say this the same about yourself, weren't like things, weren't like objects, weren't like stuff that money can buy. In fact, a lot of those things is stuff that money can't buy. A lot of those things were like the fact that you didn't have money to buy something. That's a thing that was given to me, and the lessons imparted from not having as much. The lessons imparted on being like, oh wait, I have to figure out how to, I don't know, spend this dollar in a way that it will last me until my birthday, where I'll get another couple bucks from my aunts and uncles, or my parents taking me to like yard sales, you know, when we were like kids, because you know, we could find deals there, and obviously if we could afford to like go to the store and get like new stuff, then we would have. A lot of those lessons were given to me, and I was wondering how those lessons can be given to someone like, let's say, Leo, or somebody that's growing up in a time where there isn't as much hardship. And I don't know if there's a way. Like, I don't know if you can learn those lessons without having gone through it. And so I was just having that discussion with I guess, my sister-in-law, Lisa, and it was interesting because, you know, I mean, it's not like we figured it out, but we were just understanding like, man, there's a lot of value in those lessons, even though I didn't know I was getting those lessons at the time.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think there's a way. I don't think you can get the lessons without going through it. Like I mean, it's rare to be, I think, as absolutist about things as life goes on for me, but that's one of them. Like, and I think that I do think you can be creative with it. There are ways of maybe like giving kids some of those lessons, but it won't be the full one. And perhaps the first thing to do would probably be see how you could like nurture a general empathy, because like I think empathy is what would really allow you to drop in without actually going through it yourself. And you know, maybe like if you took your kid to do maybe service work, right, and work with the less fortunate, or I mean, honestly, at some point I think it would be very important for any person to take their kid to like third world country. Like nothing will like kind of, it's a whole no, it's a, I mean, I have problems with the word third world. You know, obviously it's not a PC term, or it's a problematic term, but it is honestly like stepping into a different world, right? Like if this is what you know, and it's kind of a staggering, like mind-boggling statistic, like the amount of Americans who haven't like left like their hometown, like you know, they've always lived like what 10 miles away from like the center of their community. Like, yeah, you take a person to a different world, like, you know, you take your kid and they see all the smells, the sounds, like I'm sure there's something there to help foster that type of that feeling of like, not only is that the world is far bigger than I could possibly imagine, but also that like it's connected in some way. Man, imagine the effect of just like, if we could just shuffle people around real quick. It's like, okay, everyone gets 5 minutes to teleport to like somewhere, and then after that 5 minutes we'll teleport you back or something, right?
Yeah,
like,
you might not, some people might not make it, bro.
yeah. So
yeah, it's interesting. I guess we can kind of talk about this all day, probably. Just man, what I want to talk about here. Maybe we can segue into this. I was kind of thinking about this a little bit during the week, kind of like marinating on topics that we can talk about. And I thought it was interesting that me and you both kind of like having conversations about like around these things, because we have, I don't think we have the same background, but we have similar enough backgrounds that that there's definitely like some overlap there. You know, obviously growing up as some Asian males in Northern Virginia. I mean, that's like a very relatively specific group of people. So we have a shared background there, but also like growing up with Asian parents, growing up in a Vietnamese household, growing up, you know, I think your parents are probably in a similar situation as far as like immigrating here from Vietnam and stuff like that as my parents. And then, and obviously growing up in the lens of, hey, like, I know my family was like this, and I assume yours too, you know, kind of like be a doctor, be an engineer, be a, I don't know, pharmacist or a lawyer, or, you know, pick one of those three. Like those are the build orders that are appropriate. If you don't pick one of those 3 build orders, then we might have a problem because we know those are the ones that work. So I guess like kind of going the traditional path, but then also like going.
Small aside, real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Also, in describing this, you use the word build order, which I want to clarify for our audience is a StarCraft term, right?
Is there build orders in Valorant? I don't know, man. I'm out of touch. There's probably certain
new game.
Yeah,
that's the new game.
That's the current game that everyone is streaming and stuff. But yeah, there's probably like certain guns that you're supposed to buy and like and ammo and stuff. But and then you have like some dude that just started playing the game buying like the gun no one uses, and he's a noob.
Right. So yeah, there's these build orders, right? And you got to pick one of those ones.
Yeah, you have to pick one of those build orders, and the thing is like I guess it's more like the traditional route or the non-traditional route, right? And a lot of Asian families have issues with kids that don't go the traditional route. And I think bringing this up between me and you is kind of interesting because, I mean, both of us have done at least one non-traditional thing in our lives. I mean, I think you've been doing Muay Thai for like what five like more than 5 years now, and you actually went to Thailand for like almost a year and stayed there, like like training to be a Muay Thai fighter. I did online poker for a little bit. That literally was not. I mean, that wasn't even a little bit. That was like a decade plus almost. And then opened restaurants, which is obviously like another slightly off the path thing. So I guess I want to know your thoughts on that. In terms of I don't know, what is tradition? Why is it important? And when can you not follow the path of like, I guess, what's traditional?
Yeah, no, that's a great one. I know, and I think that one that is close to both of us for sure. What's funny is that when I think about myself and I went off the traditional path, even now, the Muay Thai bit actually pales in comparison to having chosen to take on an English major, even at the time. Like that was a whole thing too as well. And I remember feeling pretty like, I was like, I mean, I was at home in my English classes and seminars and what have you, because like the material was super interesting to me and I had an aptitude for it. But like looking around, I was like, man, this is like, there's no like people of color here. Like, like the pursuit of English, like, or a lot of liberal arts degrees, like it's not even represented in that sense. So, but yeah, like traditional, I think I guess to some degree, it's like a consensus driven thing, right? Like these build orders, these things are all voted on by society as like, as the way to go. And for our family, having come from, from a lot less, right? Sort of like, so this actually touches on something that that I've been thinking about a lot, especially because there's been so many conversations around justice and equity as of late. And it's people from various positions, right, in life, in society, in demographic, age, education, right, like giving takes on the way things should or shouldn't be. And it's really interesting because the one thing that I've observed the most as a personal critique of people is that the rules of the game are different for the thing that you're critiquing. And it is so hard to actually know what those rules are from where you are. And I think that it is worthwhile, like I'm not precluding people from being able to like look at it from their lens or their vantage point and provide influence, because all these systems should kind of like go towards the ideal, right? Like, I mean, if you've identified an ideal of some sort, it should be true across all domains to some degree, and it should kind of trickle down or cascade or what have you. So like, I think it's good, but there's a difference between having a conversation about something like you and I are having in a very narrow scope, like we're just having it in a private conversation
Hmm.
versus having a more public conversation about it, and also trying to even like entertain and prescribe potential solutions to it, right? Like those are all levels that are so much more difficult as you go. And um and I think at that lowest level where like it's Maslow's lowest hierarchy, right? It's where our parents like lived for most of their life, like survival mentality. Um like uh there's no you couldn't take certain liberties because it was life or death, and um there was no support system or network, right? Like my family, as far as I can remember, has always been four of us. 50% of the group is like little kids, you know what I mean? Like that is an extremely fragile unit, and we were like traveling around the world before we came back to Virginia. So it's like you couldn't lean on uncles and aunts. You couldn't lean on like a grandmother, a village elder. Like, you just didn't, this didn't exist. And so the stakes are high, right? And you're going to only imagine that, you're putting your kid out into a rough and tumble world where you might not always be there. Um, and they better have like be equipped with the best they got, I even now I think about like moments in time, and it's Kim, my sister Kim, who's younger than me, gave me a lot of empathy in this regard. Um, like flashing back to the moments where you first let your kids kind of go out on their own, even as teenagers. Like, can you imagine giving your 15-year-old a car and be like, okay, now you can drive? Like, oh my, you're just like, dear God, like you're just. I mean, even now I'd be like, oh my God, like please be careful. We live in a pretty unjust world. If you send your daughter out to go to a friend's party at night, and you're just like, hey, so I don't know, there's a there's like a survival lens to it that I think we can be out of touch with, because life is really good for us. um you know and there's one I'll close with this. There's this one thing that, especially because now there's a lot of war and a lot of things happening in the world right now, that I'll close with, because it's a very, I think for me, it's a very provocative thought experiment for me that helps like ground me in this whole topic that I'm talking about, which is that there exists games in the world, right? Like there's these situations in the world where if somebody looks at you the wrong way, the right course of action is to like kick their ass,
Right.
like hands down. Like, you know what I mean? Like in
Right.
prison or something like that, or like in a situation like you're like in a situation, if someone gives you the wrong look, it is the 100% the right move to just beat their ass right in front of like everybody.
Right.
And that always reminds me that the rules of the game that I go through when I'm just like doing my stuff are not the rules of the game for a majority of humans on this planet. And so I need to like remember that when I like find myself wanting to, you know, involve myself in other games, right? Because that's not, my game is different. Our game is so much different now. Like our parents' game was so much different.
It's so interesting because that you put it that way. I like the way you put it because, I mean, if you think about it through the lens of the game, that's absolutely true. Like growing up I grew up in Northern Virginia. I mean, there's certain rules to the game that we're playing, but I promise you, we're not playing the game on hard mode as an Asian male growing up in Northern Virginia. Um, and 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 yeah, man, I can only imagine in certain areas, like if someone looks at you the wrong way and you don't beat their ass, then maybe you lose some status points. Maybe you get put to the bottom of the hierarchy. Maybe somebody else comes around and beats your ass later. So the most optimal play is, yo, you looked at me like that. All right, we have to fight. And imagine, I guess imagine like when the characteristic of someone that reacts when someone looks at them the wrong way, beats their ass, and that's the gene that gets kind of like replicated in that gene pool that kind of like floats to the top. that's the characteristic that you want in that type of like a society or the place that you're living. I mean, that's just like completely wild to think about, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And in the field of epigenetics, right, where like you actually can influence your gene expression by the things that you, so this whole like environment versus or nature versus nurture argument, right? Everyone like kind of has said that like, okay, your pre-coded genes and then your environment can change you. But everyone kind of thought that like the genes you would pass on uh were the genes that you're kind of born with. But now with epigenetics, people are realizing that like the way you live your life can affect your genes. And so it gets even crazy because compounding doesn't even just happen like when you have kids that you're passing on. You've actually also like amplified that gene expression through your behavior and your choices, and then you're like passing it on again. So it's like, yeah, these traits that you allude to, man, they can they can move, right? Like move the world, move individual, and by extension, move a community for sure. It is crazy to think about. And and if you think about it, what happens when certain games that exist at lower levels, like either they loop on themselves or they, you know, there's the nature that a lower level game like manifests again at a certain like level, higher level, right? Like business is a fight, man. Business is a dog eat dog kind of world too. And so then like there are certain traits that also manifest in entrepreneurship or working in businesses. In business, like, you know, Bill Gates was known for, I mean, he's been whitewashed now, but like notoriously ruthless, like businessman. You know, the U.S. government had to go after Microsoft and antitrust stuff. Like it was a similar sense. If you are a business and you're like, okay, that business looked at me wrong, like I have to squash them now. Like I can't have like them eating into my market share. It's, you know, these rules are bigger than you think too, right?
You know, it's really interesting, and I think there's like 10 different jumping off points. Just, you know, just from this what you said in the last like 2 minutes alone. But let me just try to pick one, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, like people, the fact that you even articulated that people are playing different games based on the different places that you've come up through, you know, whether it be the society you grew up in, or like, or even like your immediate friend group, or like the school you went to, or like the business environment that you're in. I think that's super interesting because having that awareness, some people don't even have that. Some people probably don't understand, hey, that guy looked at you funny. Why didn't you beat his ass? Well, I mean, well, that's not the game we're playing. You know, this is Northern Virginia. Like, it's cool, you know. But then, so first of all, if people don't understand the game you're playing, I think that's I want to say that's a huge disadvantage. But yeah, I think okay. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you were talking about was the business thing, and I think this is interesting for me because I went so I was playing online poker for like 10 years, and online poker is a zero-sum game. I actually made I didn't make a lot of friends in online poker, but I made a bunch of really close ones. So I had maybe like maybe a handful of guys that, you know, that I definitely you know, for my time in online poker that I you know, we both looked up to each other as friends, and we kind of stayed friends. You know, to this day, I'm probably not as close to them anymore because we haven't played online poker in so long. But I could definitely hit them up and be like, "Hey, man, how's it going?" And we'd catch up, and it'd be super dope for at least like, you know, maybe 5 or 10 guys, right? But the way that online poker is set up is, you know, we're all sitting around a table, and there's a lot of money on the table, and you're trying to take money from the guy sitting next to you. And in order for you to win, the guy next to you has to lose money. Like it's a zero-sum game. It's literally, I make money by you losing money, and you can't make money unless you take it from me. And so the rules of that game, and that's literally a game, are clearly defined. It's a zero-sum game. Nobody wins unless somebody loses. Now, in the business world, in some cases, it is a zero-sum game. You know, sometimes, you know, if I open a bubble tea shop and there's a bubble tea shop next to me, it's very evident that if a customer wants bubble tea, he's picking me or you. So in those cases, it is a zero-sum game. But primarily, and I think it's been fortunate for our company at HEH, and this was not like a culture shock for me, but it was a completely different game. Like, we viewed it through the lens of a positive sum game from the beginning, just because we came from the outside of the restaurant industry. I think a lot of restaurant industry people viewed almost as a zero-sum game, just like, you know, we're serving food, they're serving food, so like, you know, we have to take their customers, or we have to take their employees, or we have to take, you know, something from them to win out at this. And on some level, there is some of that, but the way that we view it as a positive sum game is through the lens of our employees. You know, like, the restaurants don't run without the people that run them. So for us, the most important thing is almost like creating an environment where, like, hey, if someone comes and works for Happy Endings, we want to give them like a job that they actually enjoy. You know, they actually like coming to work because they have a lot of friends here. The environment that we created is something where, you know, in the time that they work for us, they're going to learn something. So by the time they leave, they're going to be like, oh, wow, like, even though I only wanted to work here for, you know, during college to make some extra money, I actually made a lot of friends. I actually learned a lot of soft skills I want to learn otherwise. And you know, and this was actually like a pretty cool place to work. And obviously, you know, so it was almost like a change in the game for me. And so when you're talking about, okay, well, the rules of the game are here, the rules of the game are here, like, those are two completely different games. And because they were just like completely different, I did notice that in my life. So I thought that description that you had was kind of like spot on. And some people don't realize that they're playing different games sometimes. And I think that's, that makes things like a little more interesting if you don't, or if you do realize that.
Yeah. There's that's a fun one, and to unpack, and we should definitely put a pin on that one to continue tracking. I will say though, glancing at the timer here, something happened in our last podcast where it did impose the 40-minute limit. But I was talking to people and they're like, no, if it's 101, it shouldn't do that. And it looks like we got that confirmation because we're at 44 now. So I think I like the rules that we came up last time. So maybe we should probably continue to abide by that time limit.
Yeah, that's fine.
And, yeah.
No, I'm absolutely cool with that, because I think having constraints is a good thing.
Yeah. Oh man, that's another topic we should talk about too, is constraints are literally everything exists because of constraints, right? Like, they create constraints, are, people see them as limiting, suffocating things, but they're actually the birth of all ingenuity and creativity, you know. So wonderful. Okay, well, let's close it for today. I think that really good topics to track on. I apologize for waking up late. It is crazy. That's also what I wanted to talk about too, which is why I woke up late is also an interesting thing. We can talk about that in our next session too as well. So
yeah, no, do you want to do a debrief for like 10 minutes and then call it?
We absolutely do. Oh, so we can just do pause. You just want to do one recording off of it?
Let's leave and come back.
Yeah, let's leave. Okay.
If we leave, it's gonna, yeah, let's leave and come back.
Yep.